Oh, how you doing?
Awesome.
It's pretty late.
This is where I thrive. I like the pod when you kind of just a bit... Look, when
Bit
you
out of
say
it.
stuff that you know people in the comments afterwards be like, 7:21? Those are the best ones.
When I started doing this podcast, I was very careful and calculated with what I say, and I'm slowly loosening that.
Well, you just realise after a while, if you're just talking for hours at a time,
You're going to say
can't.
something stupid eventually.
Probably
Yeah, stop
within
expecting
minutes.
perfection from us.
Yeah.
Jeez.
That's all I can't... Yeah, can't add anything to that. Well said.
Thank you. What'd you get up to today, by the way? I don't think I asked that.
What did I do today? Filmed more maths.
That's
bread
funny.
and
I love
butter.
your recaps, man. They're really funny.
Oh, no, that's doing that thing now.
No, that's fine.
Is it?
It's just detecting where your face is.
Oh, well, thank you very much for that, Neel. I appreciate it a lot. I'm glad somebody enjoys them. Evidently, a lot of people do. The other thing is that I've just continued my epic battle with some boomer that has no subscribers. But honestly, I think that is the best content, is just smaller YouTubers that have beef with you, bigger YouTubers, and the bigger YouTubers picking on them. It's always great. You know, like,
Pretty
put rice on the map. These kids must be stopped. It was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like it.
If any YouTubers are listening to this, someone do a call-out video of me. I want some beef.
Surely there has been some. You've been around too long for there not to be people going, stop Neel Colhatco.
I remember I've got a few blogs.
Blogs?
Yeah.
That's intense.
Someone...
What,
I don't
people
think
wrote
he's-
like newspapers about how shit you are? Is that... What did the blog say? Can we know?
One of them was I don't know if it was a specific feminist blog, but it was just saying my content was sexist.
Mm-hmm.
And
And it is.
well, it's funny, man. That's the main thing.
It's a joke. Yeah. It's like the constant argument.
Equality is making fun of each other equally. So,
Duh.
which and that like I agree with that.
Yeah, and I
That's very
100%
true.
subscribe to
Yeah.
your like joke of your strong-held opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Then I had a guy, dude, when you were getting all that heat for one of your videos being funded by the unions,
Yeah.
a guy tweeted saying, "Oh, Friendly Geordies is funded by the Labor Party, and apparently Neel Kolhatkar is funded by the Liberal Party."
Why?
I wish. That's a lot. There's a lot of money there.
Yeah, I know. What a cash cow that would be. But like, why?
I don't know. It's some guy who's suing Mark Latham or something, or suing.
Oh, that cunt. Fuck. What is his name again? Farouk.
Yeah.
Yeah, but dude, that guy is what's known in the biz as an attention whore, and might I add, extremely talentless. He's always in the peripheries of
Just one of those commentators that are a blue tick on Twitter for some reason,
yes,
but
for
don't
some
actually
reason.
do anything.
And dude, he is the
Because
definition
they
of
have
someone who
like
doesn't do
sassy
anything.
tweets and they got 50,000 followers on Twitter.
But you know,
Imagine-
those 50,000 are following. him.
Imagine having a minor following on Twitter and calling out YouTubers who have amassed an expansive following for being talentless. Like we've actually put some conception of objective talent into what we do.
Yeah.
We haven't just done mad calls.
Isn't that incredible? That when you look back at your life and you think, yeah, okay, the Enmore was a really good experience. Doing tours where you're like interviewed in America, like there's these highlights of your life, and then that guy's highlight of his life is, did you see that epic tweet that I sent? It got a few reshares. Fuck, dude. Because you know what his life is? This is how sad he is. He is one of these people.
See
Like,
why they're
okay,
all
first of all,
depressed.
yeah, it's pathetic. Like, I know very little about this man, except for like every now and then he's just brought up as a joke because he's just like very hated, right? For obvious reasons. And you know, like one of his major things has just been like nationalize Twitter. That is how enmeshed that man's life is into Twitter. He thinks that should be a national priority. But yeah, anyway, like...
I don't think that would actually give him an advantage. If you nationalize Twitter, wouldn't they make it more of a very democratic in regards to the views of the average punter in Australia? So they'd push up a lot more of the nationalistic Pauline Hanson type views. Whereas
I don't know. I don't know what he means by that.
When you think of Twitter, you think of millennial lefties. Latte sipping millennial lefties.
Yeah, the fucking Billy of the Beast being him. It's so... But again, he's just, like, I don't know, like, he just lives in a world of pure narcissism, just being enforced by this sad little cohort of 200 other narcissists that work at BuzzFeed and the ABC that constantly retweet everybody else's retweets to just, enforce this worldview that is held by those 200 people. And that worldview is basically like, I got an in because my parents are powerful into this cushy job, and everyone else on the earth sucks and is talentless, except for us.
That's it.
Who work at BuzzFeed and can't really be fired. Because, dude,
people who have organically amassed a following can't actually be talented.
Yeah. Yes.
No,
yes.
You need to do it through nepotism.
Yeah, that's the real way to do it. And look, yeah, the thing was like, I think he works for like ABC Lifestyle or some shit like that. And that is appalling because first of all, not only is he sucking up a paycheck for doing fucking, like, Better Homes and Garden shit, like taxpayer funded, this is how you make a cupboard. Fuck you. But also...
Yeah, come on, there's not much that Channel 9 and Channel 7, Channel 10 are good at, but when it comes to renovation and DIY shows, do you want a latte sipping lefty telling you how to build a cupboard, or do you want Scott Cam? You want some... Oh, no, not bogan. You want like a bloke from the western suburbs to teach you how to build a cupboard.
I know. Instead of them just going like, what you should do is go into IKEA. They've got ones you can pre-assemble. Like, fuck, dude. Like, don't waste my time and money. But like the other thing is, for ABC Lifestyle to be accumulated,
construction is dominated by white men.
I bet you that is something that they talk about all the time.
Why should we get this cupboard? Bloody good at the construction. They are.
Yeah. Take it. Fuck, Neel, spitting too many truths already. It's too early for this shit.
I'm going to chop that up. Ruin me one day.
I think, yeah.
But anyway, that was just a slight call out. But
yeah, in conclusion, fuck him.
In the very early days, when Josh Wade and I were first going viral, Lewis and a guy called Tristan Barker, they didn't call us out, but they did a video called The Australian Internet in 2 minutes. And the thing is, we had more followers than them at the time, but because they had achieved internet stardom before us, we still looked up to them. And we were really scared before the video came out. Like, oh, what are they going to do? How are they going to call us out? And then it was really tame in the end. They didn't actually call us out that badly.
Well, did they
Come on, Lewis, you could have gone further. Fucking gangly cunt. When are we fighting?
Yeah, that's right. You guys bitched out.
No, they were nice to me, actually, because they were impersonating all the other YouTubers. And for me, they were like, oh, I'm the only foreign kid on the internet who doesn't talk about being forein.
Was that their call?
Yeah, and I was like,
take that,
thank
Neel.
you. That's a compliment.
Well, that means they like you.
Yeah.
Dude, it's just, yeah, I think, look, you know what I will say about Lewis? Lewis is the closest thing to Milo's theory of a virtuous troll, I reckon. He calls out cunts that deserve it. And, I really think that he pays people that deserve to be paid.
I've never seen him call someone out where I've thought, no, that person didn't deserve to
Too far, dude.
Some people, a lot of YouTubers I have, but with him, no. I'm trying to think.
He's right about it.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, no, I haven't had any specific call-out videos. I got a lot of backlash but I didn't look at it. I turned my social media off for a week or two when I released Modern Education. But I don't think there were like specific videos. Oh, actually, no, there are some call-out videos on YouTube. I've just never watched them. Reacting to it and things like that. And just talking about how it's shit.
Dude, I'm telling you, it's content gold. You could just send it out now. You could do it now.
No, it isn't.
Just react
They
to
are
that.
very entertaining.
Don't you think?
Maybe I will.
I think you should. I would click on that with it. It
'Cause
wouldn't
your
even be
fans
a
are
thought.
obviously
It
gonna
just
be
go
on your
boom.
side.
Of
So you gotta
course.
just do it like a 3 out of 10 call out video, and they're like, "Yeah, Neel
no.
destroyed him."
Sick call. You said fuck you to him. I wish I thought of that.
Yeah, it's like when rappers have beef. Whoever the fans of those rappers are always like, "Yeah, man, that guy destroyed the other guy."
I know.
Did he really?
Yeah, I mean, look, when
Like
you're looking from objective points.
The Eminem and MGK killed him. I don't care what anyone says. Everyone's like, Eminem destroyed him. No, early Eminem would have destroyed him. Eminem now, I don't know what. He needs to get back on the drugs.
Is that what did it? Because we were just thinking about this the other day. What the fuck happened to that guy?
His
face
clean.
hasn't aged at all.
He got clean. That's what happened.
You reckon?
Yeah, when he was addicted to drugs, he came out with his best work.
Damn.
And now it's all like that. You know, the Chris D'Elia impersonation of Eminem is Eminem now. That like really angry. He's just a grumpy old man now. He's
Is
a
he?
boomer. The songs I loved so much from Eminem were the ones where he was very tongue in cheek and he was comedic. He was funny. He was really funny, and the flow, like every line, it just had this really perfect flow. Look, again, I'm not a rap expert, but it sounded really aesthetic. Whereas now it's this kind of staccato, like, and there's some work with the shelf, with the cup on the on the table, and it's
Are you
all
talking
very
about
serious.
Revival?
All of his recent stuff. And there's no comedy
It's
anymore.
insane.
There's no funny stuff. And it's like, what do you... Look, MGK was right. He was like... He had a few lines there where he said, "You're on top of the world. You've won an Oscar. You've achieved all there is to achieve in rap, and you're still a bitter, angry man." Like, what are you bitter and angry about? Just do what Snoop Dogg did. Cash in. What are you doing? Snoop Dogg timed it right. In the 90s, he was the real serious, critical rapper. I don't know if he was critically acclaimed as such, but he was the gangster rapper. And then at one point, he just thought, after Drop It Like It's Hot, yeah, I'll just do songs with Katy Perry. I'll just feature on all these pop star songs. I'll just become a meme, because he doesn't... What more do you need to prove?
Well, yeah,
You've
that's
already
true.
created your best work. Why do you need to flog a dead horse?
I don't know the answer to that, and I could
You
ponder
can't
that
top
for
the Eminem
days.
show. The Eminem show. Look, the one recent album that was quite good was the one he won the Grammy for. The
Isn't the
Marshall
Grammys a
Mash, the
farce?
one, the LP2 or whatever it was, the Marshall Mathers.
When was
LP2.
that?
Would have been, even now, it would have been about 6-7 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I've heard the Grammys are pretty fast.
Well, is that what? So he just pumps out an album a year now.
I don't think he does it every year. No, his last one was Kamikaze, which was either last year or the year before. But I don't know. I don't really keep in touch with it anymore. I was a big Eminem fan back in the day.
I mean, who wasn't?
Yeah, true.
You know what?
Still
My
love his old
mum
stuff.
was a fan, and like all of his songs back in the day were him complaining about his mum, and even she was just like, "Yeah, he's tight." You know,
That's saying
you
a lot.
got, dude,
when,
you got to
like,
respect the rhyme.
if Aussie mums, despite all the content, are still saying, "Yeah, he's talented."
I know.
He's very talented.
It was so true. I swear half of his songs were fantasies about him killing his mum. Or at the very least being glad when his
Yes.
mum was dead.
Him like raping Kim and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just all sorts of dark.
Legitimately
Dark
dark back.
thoughts.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, I remember just listening to Revival because everybody said that it was so awful, and I couldn't even get through one song. It wasn't the man I knew.
yeah, Revival was the one I think after the Marshall Mathers LP2. Look, I can't really, I don't know for sure.
And apparently he defends that album to this day, and everybody on earth just critically panned. Everybody is just like, no, it's shit, and he's just like, it's ahead of its time.
He's a different rapper. He just
Is
doesn't
he?
sound the same.
Really?
I wouldn't, obviously because I know it's Eminem, but you wouldn't recognize the. Sure, artists need to evolve and things like that, but still, the funniest stuff he
But he
did
was-
was
yeah,
like early
if
and
you're
mid
Eminem,
2000s
don't.
when he was calling out other rappers and calling out pop stars that like beef with Mariah, all that stuff. It was just so funny. He didn't give a fuck, and it was great. Now he still had his serious tracks, and they were great because among all the the tongue-in-cheek, the sort of humorous jabs at other rappers and other pop stars was this really serious, deep, dark song about his life. That was more impactful, whereas now everything he's just angry.
Yeah. Everything's deep.
So angry about, bro. And I, you know what? When you're a teenager and you've got all that angst, that's why I think people just loved him. Because they're like, yeah, fucking hate the world. Sing it, Eminem. Yeah, fuck my mom. I'm cleaning out my closet. Fucking bitch.
Yeah, but after you're a tradie for a while, and yeah, okay, see you tomorrow, Margaret. Okay, do you think it'll be done by Saturday? Probably. There's not that much to be angry about anymore. Your hormones have died down.
Yeah.
You have access to your own finances. No one can tell you you're grounded.
Yeah, when you're you go through a few years, but then if you get divorced and you go through a bit of divorce, then you get angry again. You know what?
Yeah.
Bitter men are teenage boys or early 20s incels, and then also divorced 50-year-olds.
Oh, yeah.
That's when men are at their
That's gruff.
most bitter.
Yeah. Maybe that's it.
And new parents. I don't think new parents are bitter. They're just... I've seen a lot of guys that have just recently had kids, and they didn't seem like the fatherly type. And then they're not bitter, but they're just...
It's not them.
They're tired. You can see it in their face. They are. And the kid's only like one. They're always like, fuck, I need a beer.
I know! You know,
that's like how the kids are like, ugh.
Yeah. It's the constant review you get. It never ends. Oh, damn.
Come on, man. You got
30 years.
You got, if the trends are anything to follow after millennials, you've got at least 30 more years of them living at home.
Yeah, man. It's like I'm glad that you keep tabs with this, like these remnants of my childhood, because that really, look, Eminem in my life is kind of just there with like Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon.
Yeah. Oh, there's
He's
not
a
many
staple.
guys our age that wouldn't have been influenced by Eminem's music in some way, shape, or form. He was the best.
Yeah.
Fantastic. But probably should get into the serious topic that I wanted to talk about for this podcast. So to give everyone a little bit of context, in Australia right now, it is Monday the 2nd of March. So it's the day before...
Super Tuesday.
I don't know when we'll release this. We'll probably release this in another 2 weeks. So we could be...
But you got to pay how epic that sounds, though. I wish there was
so
things
American.
like that in Australia. Super Tuesday.
Such a battle royale with
I
their
know.
politics.
Very epic sounding.
Super Tuesday. Who's going to win? Who's going to come out on top?
Yeah. It sounds like something that'd be in The Running Man. It's like some like dystopia from the 90s about like one man.
Politics is commentated on as though it is sport in America.
It's pathetic. You know what? There is something that I've noticed that is unbelievably superficial about how the American population is. Who's going to win? It's all that. It's all horse race shit. It's all polling. And I get suckered into it all the fucking time. Just my whole feed is filled with the hill, and I can't fucking watch another shark poll. Bernie Sanders is slightly up in Idaho. I've got other things to do with my life.
They love their polls.
They love it.
And look, in Australia, they do have they talk about polls a lot, but every day, new poll.
It's such specific polls, just like black voters in South Carolina.
Black working class voters over the age of 50. Bernie is losing with black voters over the age of 50 in this one regional town in South Carolina. It's over for him. It's over for him, Jim.
I don't see a path forward.
I can't see him coming back from this. It's over. If he doesn't win that precise niche group, it's done. But having said that, yes, the 2020 race is heating up. I'd just be interested to talk about who we think might win. Any surprise result, anything that might go against what people would expect. Well, Bernie's winning, but Biden had a pretty big, pretty substantial win in South Carolina.
In SC.
With older black voters.
Yes.
That was what...
I know.
Yeah. Why do you think...
I guess the polling works.
Just trying to think, like, what would be in the cultural mentality of an older black man from South Carolina that would point him in the direction of voting for Biden as
He's
opposed
linked to Obama.
Do you think that's it? Because that's what everyone says. Is that it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think it's got anything to do with Biden being more of a imposing, assertive, strongman type figure, even though now he's definitely getting older.
No, I think that it is just the fact that he's associated to Obama. Older people have like a thing of loyalty.
So did they all voted for Hillary in 2016, that demographic, did they?
Yep.
And then, well, okay, then they would have voted for Obama in the previous 2 elections. Okay, yeah, so it's all just...
They have a lot of loyalty to the Clintons and anyone that's associated to the Obamas. I don't know why that they're so in with the Clintons. Maybe it's because he played saxophone. I don't know.
That is it. He was people said he was...
First black president.
What?
I say that he was the
What a
first
thing to
female
say.
president, but yeah.
He played the sax. Oh, he's black. Oh, yeah, I mean, he's black. He played the saxophone. Yeah, you're right, Joe.
Well, he does sound like a jazz... He sounds like what I'd imagine a jazz musician would sound in New Orleans. He seems like a guy that would have a lot of black friends that are just really into Miles Davis if he wasn't a politician, just being like, play it again, Sham.
You know what he
does have that
reminds
kind of
me? He
feel.
reminds me of like the guy in the... I don't know if you ever saw that movie, a really old movie. It had Fred Astaire. It's a famous one. And there's that song where it's like, drop that bass. They're on a... It's like black and white. It's really old. But anyway, there's a scene...
Casablanca?
No.
I'm exhausted
He's a
of
tap
all...
dancer. And in the 70s in the Oscars, they did like a reunion. This is how old the film was. They did a 30-year reunion or something of the film. But he only died recently, I think. Maybe. But anyway, the point is there's a scene in that film where he goes to the, I don't know the ship terminology, but the bottom level of the ship. I don't know, back then where they were putting all the coal into the... I don't know. Clearly don't know anything about my ship. The hull?
Right, yeah.
I don't know. The bottom level, that's all I
Yeah.
know. And that's where all the... this was like really... like this was, before the 60s, definitely. That's where all the the black people were working, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were dancing and they were, just doing like stereotypical black things or whatever. Dancing. Jesus. And, according to the
Tap
Hollywood
dance.
liberals, yes, that's what they did.
Yeah.
And so he was the cool guy that came in there and just started dancing with them and like jiving and jamming with them. And then by the end of it, they were all applauding him and standing up jumping because he was that good.
Yeah, that's pretty much
how
Bill
I
Clinton's
pretty much
life.
perceive Bill Clinton.
Yeah. That's basic. You probably just saw a documentary of him. That's pretty much it. He did really just tap dance his way to the White House.
There you go.
A blessed life indeed.
That's because I guess since JFK, America didn't really have the a cool president, did they?
I don't know. Ronald Reagan. Yeah, they I don't think they did. Hang on. Let me just think through. JFK, yeah.
Was he cool? Was he slick, man?
Gerald Ford. Nixon. Yeah, no, you're right. That was it.
Yeah, Gerald Ford. He was pretty cool, man.
Damn. And you know what? They actually did. People will not agree with this, but I honestly think that George Bush Jr., funny cunt. That guy should be a comedian.
But to laugh at.
No. This is the whole thing.
Oh, he did say funny. Yeah, there was this one thing where he said, I can't really do his accent, but it was like, if you get A's, you can become a doctor or a civil engineer, and if you get C's, you too can be president of the United States.
Yeah. He's a witty man.
Wow.
Because you know what? A lot of the thing about George Bush Jr., apparently, was that he put on this yokel yuck act because it kind of endeared him to voters.
Was it an act? Because he's a very good actor.
Yeah.
That did not seem fake at all.
Look, okay, let's put it this way. He is not a smart president, but to be president, you have to be pretty smart. And just by being in that role for 8 years, you're basically getting 50 PhDs because you're just getting the most educated people on earth in every area saying you should make this decision. So it's just the people that you hang around with.
Sure.
You're around really accomplished people.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. But now, like when you see him on talk shows, he's just running loops around them. He's just so much quicker than they are.
Yeah, he is. He does seem to have improved his vernacular.
Good for him.
Just his general conversational and knowledge. General knowledge seems to have improved
That's great.
post-presidency. But anyway, digress here. So it looks, tell me if you agree with this, but it looks like Bernie will either win a plurality or a majority of the Democratic delegates.
Yeah.
And then there's talk of whether or not the superdelegates. So for people who might not know too much about American politics, the Democratic primary situation is that there's the first round of voting where all the delegates pledge their support. And then based on if you reach a 15% threshold in various states, you get a certain amount of delegates. And then there's also caucusing. I don't understand the caucusing bit, but I think it's something. There's preferences involved there and things like that. I don't know exactly, but a few states do caucuses. There was some big issue with the Iowa one. And then the convention's in July, and this time around, the superdelegates aren't going to pledge. If someone has got an overall majority of the delegates, the superdelegates will they won't need to go to the second round, so they won't even involve the superdelegates. But if no candidate has a absolute majority in the delegates, so if they haven't exceeded 50% of the delegates, the superdelegates come into play in the second round of voting at the convention. And there is talk of, because the DNC don't like Bernie that much, potentially the superdelegates could go against Bernie despite the fact that it looks like he'll at least get a plurality. And they could go with, well, it looks like it probably Biden. Or
Bloomberg.
Yeah, Bloomberg. Yeah. And
I think if I was going to steal the election, I would go with Bloomberg. And I think I would just go with it because he's kind of just made any indication whatsoever that I don't care. I will buy the presidency. I will pump as much money as required into it. So I think that he would actually be the better horse to bet on. If it was Joe Biden, I guess like just even 4 years ago, that guy was sharp.
Yeah, he's
back
lost
in the day.
it.
It's really sad. I feel really sorry for the guy.
It's
Like
sad, hey.
dude, it's mental decline in action. And the other thing is, everybody
Like
always just
severe
does this
cognitive
because they've
decline.
yeah, it is.
He can't answer questions properly.
No, and he used to be like a feared debater.
Yeah,
he
even
was really good at
Even
it.
2016, he was fine.
Yeah,
So clearly, just in the last 2-3 years,
yeah, something's happened.
early onset dementia, whatever it is.
Well, I
Look,
don't know
all
if
of
it's
them
early.
are really old as well.
Yeah,
All of them are really old.
yeah. It takes
Because
that long to accumulate.
not Bloomberg. What's his name? Just dropped out.
Buttigieg.
The judge. Yes.
Have you heard the conspiracy theory about him being linked to the CIA?
No.
And look,
Yeah.
I think
Why?
it makes
It's weird that he
complete
dropped
sense.
out.
Yes, don't you think? And it's
Super
all just the
weird.
thing because I think that what happened is that they put him in as like a secondary bet. Obviously there's a lot of people that want to be president, but like, why was this mayor from nowhere that's from this fucking town that I can't even remember the name of, that is like basically the size of Dubbo? It might be a bit bigger, I don't know. Whatever. Look, the thing is, it's a tiny town that no one gives a shit about. How is he like a presidential candidate?
That's a good point. How did he even get that initial
boost.
buzz?
The
about
buzz.
when he came from such a minor
Yeah.
political position.
How are you getting those connections, those high set connections for billionaires to go, yeah, here's
Okay,
money.
let's delve into this. What's the CIA connection?
I am not too versed on it, but I think that what happened is that he is, and this is the same thing that happens in Australian politics as well when it comes to the CIA and global politics. It's really scary delving into this shit because
Do they pay him off or something?
no, absolutely not. It's like he would have had the ambition of wanting to be president, obviously.
Yeah.
But the thing is that he is connected to certain groups, and those groups just think like, yeah, this guy will like play ball, we'll put him there. Like, it's the same thing that happened in the Whitlam dismissal, and like I think Kevin Rudd as well. Like, all of these, there's always just people that are like in these like almost front groups that are set up that are called things like, I don't know, United Democracy or something like that. And that's basically just like a connecting thing where like CIA people can just look at like who's coming into governing and governance or decision makers and just like kind of like pushing them along in that area. Like the
Right.
same, like with the Governor General,
But then why did he drop out?
because dude, it would make so much sense that he would, because look, it's not like his camp, the whole thing with all of these other people, yes, there's all these like no paths forward and shit, but like, like he didn't have a path forward and Amy Klobuchar did. No, the reason that they want to keep Amy Klobuchar in is because she might hold her state. And it's the same thing with Elizabeth Warren. She might hold her state against Bernie Sanders. But when it comes to Buttigieg, it was just another guy that was like leeching votes off of Biden and Bloomberg, right? So there's no use for him. So obviously, I think that his puppeteers just rang up and said, "You're done. You're finished. Go." Like you've done your use. Like I think the original strategy when Bernie Sanders came in was this guy's got groundswell. Look, the other thing is when it comes to conspiracy, it's always kind of this 50-50 thing of
He's young and he's gay and he's fresh faced.
well, there's all that shit. Yeah, there's all that shit that like is surrounding it. But I think that the other thing is that like how there was like 30 candidates or something at the beginning.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of it was just like throwing shit against the wall, seeing what's going to stick, and it was all just about trying to drain vote away from Bernie Sanders or drain attention away from Bernie Sanders. I think that was the strategy that they were going towards because they realized when it came to Hillary Clinton, like if it's just one-on-one, Bernie Sanders will get the majority of the vote. I think that's what the play was there. If you're going to buy into like the CIA plot. But dude, the thing is, like, look, the CIA orchestrated, and it's just like common, it is public record, like 70 coups across, hundreds of coups, like 70 invasions since World War II, but hundreds of coups across the planet. Like, why wouldn't they do it to their own government? Of course they would. So I think that, like, there's merit to that theory. And it makes a lot of sense. Like, again, why the fuck else would why would Buttigieg get out? Especially because
It does seem weird.
It's weird. And the other thing
He's still third in the delegate count.
Third in the delegates. If you don't have a path forward to presidency, so what? It's just about staying there so you're just in the public's mind for as long as possible. Yeah.
I heard that he spoke to Biden and Biden offered him, well, whether it's VP or some sort of cabinet position in a potential Biden presidency.
And that's actually another good point. And I don't even think it discounts the CIA theory, but I think that, look, there's definitely something there. It's very interesting, the Buttigieg one. Like, there's
very odd time to drop out.
It's odd. Dude, 2 days after Super Tuesday, just see how you go.
Yeah.
Why would you just drop out then?
Yeah. Clearly, I think there were some greater powers that might have thought he was taking votes away from people who were otherwise ahead of him and whatnot. But anyway, it looks like Bernie will... I don't think he'll get an absolute majority. I think he might get a plurality.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know. But I doubt they'll then take the... Because then they're really just shooting themselves in the foot. Then they're basically handing the presidency to Trump again.
But this is the whole point. Do they care?
That's true.
Because...
They might not.
This is what... Look, people always... This is another thing that sticks at my craw, right? Is that people always try and... export what happens in American politics to Australian politics and be like, Democrats are Labor and Republicans are Liberals. But actually the way to think about it is that the Democrats are closer to the Liberal Party here and the Republicans are just like so corrupt that it's just kind of like, it's just, like they make a virtue out of it. Like I can imagine a senator standing up and saying, it is against freedom and liberty for billionaires not to bribe senators. That's why I'm including this ultimate freedom bill. Like, it seems like they're just kind of cool with it at this point. But the thing is that when it comes to the Democrats, dude, it's a really corrupt party. They both are. Like, it's just because it's the center of power for the world.
Just out of curiosity, what would be like if a billionaire did want to? Would you put a cap on political donations?
Where?
Just in general.
In America?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would the cap be?
Look, honestly, if it were up to me, clearly the best system globally for every democracy would just be to have like publicly funded elections of just you get this much money, you get this much money. That's all you get. But the thing is, what people don't understand is that just campaigning is very secondary to media coverage, so that doesn't matter.
Don't you think they'd still be able to that businesses would still be, and if rich individuals and businesses wanted to gain political influence and power, even if they are not legally allowed to donate to a candidate directly, there would be some other way.
Yeah, like super PACs.
Yeah, or
well, it's like the same thing.
Some other enticement that would occur.
I mean, dude, they figured it out with fucking college football. I think they're going to figure it out with, like who decides who drops nukes. They're going to figure that there's going to be back ways, as you said. I think that this is just like it's kind of a fairy tale. Yes, there's ways to clean it up, but the idea that there's ever going to be free elections is just, like, in my opinion, it's just completely naive. It's never going to be this kind of like, just two campaigns equally funded and they'll get equal media time. There's always going to be interests competing in their way. And even these things, like when it comes to the CIA kind of, what's the word? Sort of just like green lighting certain candidates. Things like that. Those things are never going to go away. Those are just really behind the scenes things. Look, yeah. I would be trying to reform donations. But the other thing that people don't understand is, and the Koch brothers figured this out, and you can read it, I think, in Democracy in Chains, but the Koch brothers figured out that bribing candidates, that's not the main way that you influence them. The main way you influence them is by saying, if you don't do what we want, we will find this other person that will do what we want, and we'll just fund his campaign. So you just out-primary them.
Yeah, because they just want to be president.
Yeah.
They're willing to do anything.
Or like on a congressional level and a Senate level, all these other offices. This is the other thing as well. Like when it comes, people always just think that like the president is this ultimate kingmaker, but actually Chomsky actually puts it the best way. Is like, really the president is a figurehead. It's kind of like the Queen of England. Yeah, they've got more powers, I guess, because like they've got veto and things like that.
But yeah,
and
right.
executive orders.
Yeah.
But really, like, the actual inaction of them is just like... He was always saying this when they were just being like, what would you say if you met George W. Bush? And his response was, he's basically a figurehead. If I ever met him, I wouldn't talk to him about Iraq. I just asked, have you talked to God recently? Like...
Yeah.
Like, it's just
Sure.
they're kind of just imposed there. Look, it's not all doom and gloom, and yeah, like, maybe Bernie Sanders will make it, but... I am reserving my hysteria that I think he's going to make it. I think I change all the time though. Sometimes I'm just like, yeah, he won Nevada. Like, why even have the rest of the primary?
Yeah. Well, the other argument, they're not just doing irreparable damage to their chances in the 2020 election if they give it to someone else who didn't get a plurality of votes. That's the part that no one would then want to vote for them for many elections to come. People wouldn't forget something like that.
No,
the Hillary Clinton thing was one thing, but if he actually gets the plurality and then the superdelegates go with someone else...
Dude, nah.
That's not just the 2020 election. That's for years to come.
Man, the average American doesn't think about politics at all. It's very easy to dupe them. And people's memories change in a second. There's all these things that people always say, like, oh, they're done now, and then people forget like a week later. This is about campaigning and strategy, and dude, people's opinions are very fickle. And there's, as we've been talking about in other podcasts, there's like 100 years of concerted propaganda tools that are instigated to change public opinion quickly. And again, like, yeah, you might not fool some people. There's always going to be like that 20% of the population that's like heavily invested or whatever, but... what about the other 80% of votes that are up for grabs?
Yeah, fair point. The other argument I would put forward is that actually more of a mainstream media argument, which is the policies of the other candidates are a lot closer to each other, whereas Bernie's policies are very different. So even if he gets a plurality, but let's just say 60% of the vote is shared between Biden, Klobuchar, Warren, and Bloomberg, there actually would be an argument. I wouldn't agree with it. I'd still give it to Bernie, but there would be an argument to say, well, the American people, well, the Democratic primary voters wanted these policies. Therefore, we should put someone up who is putting forward those policies.
Yeah, and look, honestly, I don't really know what the answer is to that because you could... Look,
I don't think it's an invalid argument because I've heard some people say, oh, that's just ridiculous to say that.
Yeah, but why is it ridiculous to say that? That's the point, right? Like, what is actually the counter-argument to that?
That it doesn't matter if the policies are closely related between those candidates. If there's one candidate that got the most votes, they should get the...
Exactly.
Which I agree with.
But I don't know if
that argument's valid.
See, this is the whole thing. It's just like both of them are just like technically democratic, aren't they? Like basically what they're talking about is how our electoral system works. Like how you just have preferential voting.
Yeah.
I suppose they're kind of
Yeah.
just determining who gets the preferences, but
Yeah,
yeah,
they're a
like
lot more.
clearly, like Klobuchar and Biden are more aligned than like Bernie is. So I don't know, dude. Like, look,
Then, okay, let's say Bernie is the nominee. I don't know if he can beat Trump, because as I think we were talking about this last week, then the media will suddenly, I don't think they'll necessarily be in favor of Trump, but they won't be attacking him relentlessly in the same way they did in the 2016 election.
no, because he'll be their guy this time. And you know what else? It's just like as soon as Trump got in, there was this global convention of bankers. I can't remember what it's called, but basically they were just sat there and they thought, they looked at Trump's policy and they thought, why did we put so much money into Hillary Clinton? Like,
Well,
he's a Republican. He's not going to attack the banking system.
And then if you just put policies forward for people to vote for, they'd be very aligned. The average person in America, from what the polls say, would be quite aligned with his policies, but a lot of them just still vote Republican because it's more of an emotional attachment they have to that party and what that culturally stands for. And that's a big thing.
You know what?
So that's the party of America. That's the party of freedom. I'm going to vote for that party. That's the party of being a man. Democrats are soy boys.
Yeah, you're right. And look, that's the other thing as well.
How do you get rid of that? How do you, if you were, let's just put out, if you were a Democratic strategist, a corrupt Democratic strategist.
Hey, that one turned off.
Oh, for fuck's sake, what's with the fucking... Potential Sanders-Trump general election in 2020. I actually think, if I was a betting man, I'd still think Trump would win.
Well, he's got more things going for him.
Yeah.
And he's extremely charismatic. He has a very rabid, loyal fan base. That's in his favor. He's got like entire institutions behind him, because that's the whole thing. Once you're in government, it's a lot easier to stay in government.
As much as we hate, as much as I've been critical of this new conception of the SJW, which is essentially the anti-SJW, people still really hate quote-unquote identity politics and are willing to just vote for someone who they think represents the antithesis to that.
Yeah.
So that's, I know that seems like a silly thing, but I really think that's a big part, because like you said, like, a lot of people aren't really, they don't delve deep into the specifics and the machinations of politics, and they just say, yeah, that guy, he represents what I stand for.
Even more basic than that, the feel that they give off.
Yeah. Coming across as a decent person is half the battle. So I really,
Well, when
you
it
know
comes
what?
to that,
I want Bernie to win because I would love to see Kanye versus Bernie 2024.
that'd be funny as shit.
But I think if Trump wins 2 terms, I don't think Kanye will win
It'll be
2024.
Kanye versus Trump.
I think if Bernie does, look, I'm putting it at like 75-25 to Trump. So I do think Trump would win if it's Trump versus Bernie. But if Bernie does win, I still think Kanye will win in 2024.
Wait. Kanye versus Bernie.
Well, I don't think Bernie will do a second term. He will be very old then. He'll be 83. Look, maybe I wouldn't put it past
that's the other
him.
thing as well. Who else have they got?
Wouldn't put it past him. It depends. It'll be interesting. Who's he gonna? Is there any talk about who he might pick as VP?
No, but if I was him, look, I think that what you should be doing is putting in Tulsi Gabbard.
I think so as well.
Yeah, she would be a really good vice president. No, somebody to like, somebody to sort of just like give a lot of spotlight to as a future president that you're trying to set up that would kind of just like continue the Bernie legacy.
And
she was one of the only ones. She was in a position of power in the Democratic Party, and people forget this as well. She was loyal from the very beginning. When it was only going to be of detriment to you and your prospects in the Democratic Party to back Sanders. She backed Sanders. That has to count for something, surely. Now, I don't think that they're going to get it because she's going to get all the baggage of just being like homophobic and all that kind of shit. But look,
But in a general election, you want someone who is going to try to switch some of the more culturally conservative voters.
Yeah.
She's a former military.
Yeah. But, you know,
Remember-
the counter argument to this, though, is she did not perform well. You know what, though?
She didn't among registered Democrat voters, but in a general election, I think she'd perform better than a lot of these other people who are getting 7-8%.
I think that, yeah, maybe. That's true. But I think that, like, a major reason for why she didn't perform so well is, first of all, she's basically saying the same things as Bernie Sanders. She's just got this more one-item thing of just being like, no more wars. So, but it's like, it's a very secondary issue to most people. It's always the same thing of just like, yeah, well, what about my back pocket? So she's not running on that shit, even though she basically agrees with all the same things as Bernie Sanders does. But I think that the other thing is, she's kind of boring, man. That's the thing about both Bernie Sanders and Trump. They're good communicators.
Yeah. She, her cadence and her rhythm isn't as exciting and inspiring as some of the other candidates, for sure.
Well, it really
She
is.
speaks in that very militaristic,
Yeah.
measured tone.
Down the line. Almost monotone.
Mm.
Look, that's the other thing that I think it really should be.
She hasn't dropped out yet. She's still technically in
No,
the
yeah,
race.
which is and admirable as well, because again, it shows. Look, why would Buttigieg drop out? Why the fuck is Tulsi Gabbard still in?
Yeah,
because
it's a bit
Tulsi
bizarre.
Gabbard is running on a principle. I think it's just because she is just trying to draw as much attention as possible to the point that she's making. And again, Buttigieg isn't. Buttigieg is there for his own aggrandizement.
I was actually quite disappointed at Andrew Yang's performance. I was a fan of his.
Yeah, but
Didn't
man,
do very well.
As if he is the Bitcoin of presidents.
No, I thought he'd get, your 4 or 5%.
He didn't even get that.
I don't think he did, no.
Damn, that is pretty woeful.
Well, he only did Iowa and what was the second one? New Hampshire.
Why did
I
he
think
drop
he
out so
dropped out.
quick?
Pretty dismal results.
So that was the reason.
I-
He just couldn't continue the campaign with that.
Yeah, what would be the point?
And see, this is the other stupid thing. Buttigieg won, technically, one of those primaries. Anyway, sorry, I'll shut up about that. But think about it, man.
No, it's definitely something to think about.
See, look, the whole thing is, though, that I don't want to put people's hopes down, but look, Bernie Sanders, even if he became president, which I think, look, I think that his chances are better than they would be in virtually any other country. First of all, because he's an excellent communicator. He's got that. He's very good at just keeping his message out there. So it's very hard for journalists when they're in a one-on-one interview to get him off track or to give him a gotcha question. He's done 75 years of saying, or 65 years of saying the same fucking 4 points over and over again. He's very good at that. He understands the soundbite media landscape, so he's good at getting that message out. Obviously, he's going to have buckets of money thrown against him, and then he's going to have the entire media establishment against him, and probably the Democratic Party against him. But the thing is, I would say that he has a better chance than usual of a candidate like that getting in, basically because America's living standards it's depression kind of stuff. It's like it's a different world because they didn't understand how to keep an economy kind of artificially afloat back then as they can now, but for the average American, it's pretty dismal. So I can imagine that a candidate like Bernie Sanders would kind of just rise above all of that fray, which is what usually happens in these circumstances. So he could get there. But, look, a president can't do much by themselves. Really what he'd be doing is just having this megaphone where he could just keep reminding the American public of what's important. That would be the great thing about Bernie Sanders being there. But, for him to win the Senate, that would be phenomenal. For them to win the House, yeah, probably. But the thing is that, like, dude, even if they win those two things, technically, even if the Democrats win it, there will be, like, heaps of Democrats within the Democratic Party that will be voting against his proposals. So
Yeah,
It's
so
just this
not
thing of,
really. It'll be considered a big victory for his supporters, but there's only so much he can actually do.
there's only so much he can do. I mean, he can appoint judges. That's a really, really important thing. And the other thing is, again, what I'm saying is that he can constantly articulate how the system is corrupt. And that's important. Basically, just informing the
probably
American
what he'll
public on
do
how they're getting
for 4
screwed
years.
over. Yeah,
He'll just say that.
yeah. He'll have a lot of initiatives when it comes to climate change. I'm very excited about that. But see, this is the whole thing. I think any Democratic president will actually have like a lot of strong initiatives when it comes to climate change. It's just in varying degrees. Obviously, Bernie Sanders' plan is better than Joe Biden's, but it's not like Joe Biden's is weak. Joe Biden's plan is like, it's trillions of dollars of investment we're talking about, which is great. So I don't know. Yeah, like when it comes to like military imperialism and stuff like that, look, I don't even know if he's going to be able to do this much because, again, he is one guy in this giant machine that is well established and has been running basically the same way that it has since World War II. These things are bigger than one person. This is what people don't understand. Dude, it doesn't mean that I hate the guy. Like, I think Bernie Sanders is mad and I hope that he's president. But he understands it himself. He sees that his position will not be commander-in-chief. He wants to be chief organizer. Really what he wants to be is like a giant union boss, really. He just wants to be constantly trying to organizing work and kind of just telling people about how they should be organizing to get what they want. That's how he sees his role. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Because he understands.
I can see that.
He understands how,
See that.
did you hear the story about when he was mayor? It's insane. This is what I'm saying. Like, if there is anybody that can do it, it is Bernie Sanders. There's no question about that. But when he was mayor, he only won by 10 votes, I think. But as soon as he got in, the Republicans and the Democrats just started blocking everything that he was doing. Even his appointment for secretary. They said, no, you can't have your own secretary. The guy that just says, you've got a 4 o'clock. That person they wouldn't even give him. So they were just so oppositional to him. And the Democrats and the Republicans bandied together to block his initiatives. So what he did was he went around them and then he picked up all of these... He made sort of like a shadow government for like all the positions of councillors, I guess, or whatever they're called in America, for the people that are just below the mayor. He made a shadow government of them. He just completely ignored the Republicans and Democrats that were in these positions, the cabinet, I guess. And he just went to this shadow government and said, if you were, I don't know, just the guy that does zonal and stuff like that, what would you be doing? And then what he did was he just went to these community organizations and just starved the budgets of all of these Democrats and Republicans and put all of that money just directly into community organizations. And as a result of that, the city afterwards was like, hey, this guy's on the level. And then his voting margin the next election just went through the roof, and then he was able to actually get these people into these positions. So maybe he's thinking of something that he'll be able to do like that. But dude, it's not going to be the same as this piss tiny little city and when you're playing with the big boys, your Bloombergs and your Cokes of the world. They're going to be smart as well,
Yeah, so it's essentially futile to have a conversation of who's going to win the presidency, because really the discussion to have is the machine itself.
Well, I mean, that's always
And
the
delve
distraction.
into
But
that.
look, it does make a difference who's president. That's absolutely true. And it definitely makes a difference which party is in power. That's also true. But what you should be thinking about is the competing interests behind them. And that's what's really cool about Bernie Sanders is he's trying to just he's basically saying to the American public, you can be the interest in your government. As opposed to the government just being run by the military industrial complex and oil companies and banks, you can be together, collectively, one of those interests. I think that's what the message of his campaign is essentially. Which is, look, that's what needs to happen in democracies. People need to understand that if you want the government to work for you, you have to be involved in the government. You have to actually pay attention to this shit, and you have to organize, and there's all that kind of shit. It's all tedious stuff. And you have to have a candidate that gets people excited about organising as well, which is, it rarely ever happens. Because usually these people are really boring people. They're usually your Elizabeth Warrens of the world, right? She's sure, let's talk about my 2% tax plan. Let's not.
Right. Yeah, sure.
You need to have some kind of charisma to it. And you need to be able to say the message so that, dumb people can understand it. It's all that kind of shit. But dude, I take your point though. I do actually think that, look, Trump probably has a much better shot than people would I don't know, our generation, I guess, would like him to have.
And the media elites.
But yeah, dude, the media elites, like,
If you
dude,
talk to your average... I mean, Australia, obviously, very different. I imagine it's amplified in America. If you just talk to, like, your average working class male in particular, almost all of them have something to say about, fucking political correctness these days. And they just want someone who represents that anger.
and you know what's really
Trump
frustrating?
does that.
He does that. But what's very frustrating about Bernie's campaign is it's also really good. Bernie Sanders didn't focus on it at all, any of the like social issues. And in this election, he kind of just says like, you know, it's a little 10% focus of it or whatever. But really his bread and butter is always just talking about, look, your wages have been stagnant for 30 years. You know, I think more than anyone, most Democratic candidates try and play into that identity politics thing because, and look, honestly, yeah, Republicans do it, but they just do it in a different way. Like they're just being like, there's a war on Christmas and all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
But it's all just about energizing these huge bases of support. So what are Democrats relying on when it comes to elections? They're relying on black churches to come out and vote for them, right?
Yeah, the black
and
vote.
Latino churches.
That's why Kanye, he's gonna...
But dude, don't you
He's
think
gonna
that
get
the
the
average
black
black
churches.
person would fucking hate Kanye?
No, but I think they might hate the exuberance and some of the characteristics of, in the same way some people who voted for Trump might not necessarily agree with every part of his character, but they will vote. They will vote for him.
Yeah, you're probably
They'll
right.
vote for a black guy, who's lived the black experiences. What, from the ghetto in Chicago?
I mean-
Obama grew up with like a white single mum in Hawaii. That's not that black.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything really black about that guy's vibe,
Kanye
was
is
there?
very black.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, look, that's actually a point. And, you know, if you were going to run like a Trump-esque candidate, that would be the guy that they would pick for the Democrats, I guess. But the thing is, on top of that, dude, I think there is actually some... Well, no, they're geniuses in both the same thing. It's just marketing. Like, both of them are
Yeah,
really
it's
good at
all
branding
marketing.
themselves.
I wanted to talk about his policies a little bit more, but we probably do have to wrap it up.
Whose?
Bernie's.
Oh, right. Why? What do you want to know?
Well, I just wanted certain things where, for example, the speculation tax on Wall Street, it will raise X amount of money. Does that take into account the potential changes in the quantity of those particular transactions, or how much Wall Street would change the volume of their speculative decisions when there is that tax? So for example, there was also a tax on like high frequency trading or something like that. But if that tax is in place, wouldn't the volume of high frequency trading
Diminish.
go down? So
Yeah,
then the
probably.
revenue would actually... Do they take that into account? How do they predict that? So how do they come up with these estimates that this is the amount of revenue raised from this particular tax?
You know what? I think that they would definitely understand that it would diminish. These would all just be ballpark estimate numbers anyway, because dude, we don't even know when it comes to speculative trading and shit like that how much actually is getting. It's the same thing with like tax avoidance. No one actually really knows how much is getting sucked out of the economy. I think the main thing that what you're trying to do is like it's the same thing with like a carbon tax, right? You are trying to discourage the population from making money in that specific way because it has no actual benefit. What you should be doing, and this is the whole thing, is like, look, you tax things that you don't want happening, like smoking and alcohol.
Sure,
and
but
things.
in the policies, you're saying to pay for X policy, we are going to use this particular tax. So it's not just, we're just going to tax this to discourage the behavior.
Yeah, but he's saying that like, when it comes to these kind of things of like, yeah, we'll make the revenue this way. Really what Bernie Sanders has figured out is that, look, first off, especially when it comes to America, Australia, the substance of what they actually discuss, and it's nowhere near what I would like it to be, but it is a lot better than it is in America. And in America, They basically care about polls. The next thing that they'll ask after that to try and get Bernie on things is just like, how are you going to pay for Medicare for all and all that kind of shit, right? I think what he's figured out is that it doesn't actually matter how you're going to pay for it to the average American, right? Because the thing is, dude, if America wanted to pay for Medicare, it could. Just like every other developed country on earth, it will. Especially because it like costs less than it does to just run the system that they're having, right? What he's understood is the best way to answer that is to just find something that like everyone's just going to be like, yeah, and cheer, right? Who the fuck is going to sit there and be like, a tax on speculation in the stock market? Oh, I don't know about that. Like, 200 people in America? Like, the vast majority of people are going to be like, yeah, tax those fat cats. I think that's the whole messaging behind it. The thing that really what it, like, look, it's basically a talking point is what I'm saying. The crux of the matter is it doesn't really matter if the base of what you're taxing diminishes over time. There will be other forms of revenue that will be paying for Medicare, just like everything else. It just changes. It's just, I think it's a clever talking point to say. And on top of that, there should be a tax on it, I think, as well, because you should always be encouraging your population to be investing in things like, dude, even like robotics or like, education or infrastructure or something else, something that is tangible and has other economic benefits to it. That's, I think, the main points of his argument would be. Like, if you really crux it down.
But isn't Wall Street speculation? They could be speculating on the increase of value in certain industries like robotics.
No, but like, well, I don't know. Like, I don't actually know what high frequency
trading. Yeah, they just come up with formulas and computers that just trade basically.
Yeah, which like, so there is nothing. Their product at the end of the day is nothing. There is nothing that they are actually making money off, and they are making like billions of dollars off that.
Could you make the argument that the software that they're coming up with, because it's such a competitive environment, that software is advancing at such a rate that no, I'm not even being facetious. They're like the software then
has
is
other
advancing
uses?
at it because of there's that extreme competitive pressure in the higher echelons of Wall Street. That software is advancing at a much higher rate than it would be advancing in other industries or in other areas where there wouldn't be that kind of competition.
And then you could use the computing in other areas. Look, anything that you invest a lot of money in is always going to have some net benefit somewhere down the line, right? But it's just like, surely there's better uses for it than that. That's the whole point. That's what people don't understand about governing, right? It's like when you're talking about an economic strategy, really at the end of the day, you should just be looking at what is going to be benefiting the economy as a whole as opposed to just specialized industries. And this is the whole difference between, say, like how the Labour Party set up the economy in the 80s here as to how, like, Reagan and Thatcher set up the economies in the US. And it's the same thing. Like, it's just this massive thing of like, look, corrupt governments will favor monopolies or industries at a charitable level. Usually they just favor monopolies. Whereas like a good government will be constantly trying to encourage markets. That's the key difference there.
What do you think about the counter argument, which is, what if there's a corporation that's so good it just develops a natural monopoly?
Yeah, but like, let's think of an example though. I mean, like in small areas, I guess, like jewelry or something, maybe. I don't know, but like when you're talking about things, see, this is the whole thing. Look, as soon as this shit affects the bottom line, you know how like it was always just that, like your Crowder mob and all that shit, they were always just putting to this point of, like if you get good enough to the point that you are a monopoly, then what's wrong with that? That is democracy. People are voting with their wallet. But as soon as like, Facebook having a monopoly, they were just like, the government needs to regulate it. It's just, their tune changes very quickly.
Yes, and that's dishonest on their part.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that really, like, most of the time, when a company has a monopoly, it's going to be bad. Maybe when like even when it comes to innovation and shit like that, even when it comes to innovation, once a company gets a monopoly, they stop innovating. They just their main concern is maintaining that monopoly. And so, like, they just kind of just put out a product that is like, it's like the thing that we're talking about with John Deere tractors and shit like that, right? Like, now they got there by having like a better tractor. But what happened after that is that they just made tractors that have these really complicated computing pieces in them that farmers can't repair themselves. And so now there's this huge market for 90s John Deere tractors because they're better than the ones that they're putting out now. That's what happens to monopolies most of the time.
Okay. Does the government need to what extent does the government need to regulate that then? Because if a company stops innovating and there's a decent enough, there's decent enough opportunity for entries for other companies, wouldn't they just subject themselves to a competition from other companies which can see that, oh, this monopoly isn't innovating anymore, this is a chance for us to gain some market share?
But there's a point where, like, that's the whole point of, like, there's the insidious nature of a monopoly is that it just gets to a point where, like, you can't compete in the market. Like, it's not even just the name recognition. It's just, like, the entry level of money that is required for that region. Like, it's the same thing, like, when people say this about, like, Google and its search engine. It's impossible at this point for a search engine to rise to the level of Google. It's just the level of money and the level of infrastructure that they have. There's not a bunch of banks on earth that could pump enough money into a competitor.
Yeah.
That's when we're talking about a true monopoly. And that's when you need governments to come in and, like, break that shit up. And, you know, when it comes to something like Google, I don't think that they'll even have the balls to do it.
How do you break, like, what are the, how do you do that?
Well, see, look, that's a really complicated policy area. And, like, the nuance of that, I was just trying to listen to them talking about regulating Facebook in Australia. And look, a lot of the time when you can't understand something, it's because people are purposefully trying to make it sound complicated, so you just stop listening to it. It's like what they do with the renewables debate and things like that, right? But yeah, when they were talking about, like, regulating Facebook in Australia, I just completely fucking tuned out. Like, these are very complicated ideas of, like, how you break up this stuff. But look, this has happened in the past, like with Microsoft.
Would it do? Would there be any? I don't know. It just seems. I haven't done any extensive amount of research into that, but
no, neither. But
just intuitively, just breaking up a big company like that it just seems quite simplistic. And what?
But that's the whole point. Like,
then would they be still competing against each other? How many companies do you break it into?
Well, like with Microsoft, like, it was just a thing of, like, breaking it in two gave the opportunity for Apple to rise. Now, look, a duopoly is...
Was that the government?
Yeah, in the US. It was... And look, I don't know the history of it, and I'm sure that you could read about it and people would be saying they didn't go far enough and all that shit. Look, the same thing happened with banks in the 30s. There's certain points in history where huge institutions are broken up because it's just it's undisputed that they just have way too much power. That is definitely what happened to Microsoft. And as a result of that, innovation was thwarted. Because, again, like, what is the incentive to innovate? The only incentive to innovate is to get a profit. But once you've just controlled profit, it's all just about keeping it there. And, like, it's the same with McDonald's and all of these other companies. At the end of the day, companies are going to sacrifice innovation, quality, service, all that shit for increasing their bottom line to keep their shareholders happy. So, like, when it comes to, like, especially when it comes to things like, you know, telecommunications, like these necessary things like data retention, all of these things.
Yeah.
Like, when it starts coming into, like, a necessity or, like, starts really infringing on, you know, people's lives, when, like, say, for instance, with Facebook, how it's just this giant data mining company.
Yeah.
Like, the idea that one company is able to control the world's data. Data is going to be the oil of the 21st century. We're just talking about a decade from now. It already is. You know, that's, like, getting to the point where, like, banks are having massive banks are scared of Google now. Banks are having meetings about, fuck, these guys could just come in because they're coming up with their own currency, the Libra currency, right? And they've just realized they've just made us redundant in one move. Google's just been like, dude, banks, like the thing that has always been the evil puppeteer of every government since, dude, royal families. Before that, we're talking before democracies, puppeteers of royal families. Those things are shit scared of Google. Like,
Well, then I don't know. Could you then say that's not even a bad thing? That's some competition for the banks.
I'd say that, but that's because I just fucking hate banks. But the thing is that, like, my friend Ali, who understands this argument a lot better than I do, his point is always that once Google is controlling money, you will miss banks. And I think he's right, because now there is like a few, it's always the same thing. It's just, that's kind of just how power works and how money works. It's just eventually, if you don't have some kind of referee in there kind of teasing out money and saying you can't profit in this area, what eventually starts happening is cannibalization. Things just start eating each other up, and you just have these mega companies, and you start getting into those dystopias like in Blade Runner, where there was just the Tyrell Corporation that ran everything. You don't even have to look that far. Like South Korea is just a small example of that, where it's just Samsung owns everything, makes everything from watches to lollies to cars. It controls South Korea. This one entity. I think that's the world that we're like getting into quickly.
I mean, again, I don't mean to simplify this, but if they do it well,
if they do what well though?
All that production.
Oh, the production of like
We're just talking about consumer goods.
Yeah, but see, here's the whole thing, right?
Is when it comes to Samsung, necessarily a bad thing?
But no, but the thing is, the competition just isn't there. Like, I have had Samsung lollies. There is a reason that Samsung lollies are not found anywhere else except South Korea. Yeah. And it's because they're fucking shit. And basically what they've done is gone to the government and they've just said, I want you to put an import tax on... See, this is where like money starts protecting itself, right?
Yeah.
So that they can just say like, oh, well, you want South Koreans to have a job, don't you? And it's just like, yeah, I guess so. And then like, but you know, this idea of like the best winning, well, they can't even compete. They can't even get into South Korea because they've got all of these tariffs on them to get in there in the first place. That's what happens in monopolies. So it's not even the best. It's just they're the only thing. That's what will happen definitely when it comes to Google. And if
so Libra you need to get rid of the tariffs.
Well, this is the whole thing that people don't understand about. You know, people are always criticizing Labor in the 80s for introducing foreign banks into Australia. But dude, that is how markets are supposed to work. You're not supposed to have just 4 big banks in Australia controlling all the money and deciding like what the market share is going to be. You should have banks from Saudi Arabia and Singapore and stuff competing. So you can like lower home loans and you can... so it just makes everything a lot more efficient when you've got competition.
But then wouldn't some people say that the wage stagnation that has been experienced over the past few decades, a lot of that is due to... opening towards global markets and a lot of low labor jobs being outsourced?
No, well, yeah, look, that is a result of poor regulation and then purposefully making wages stagnate. That is legitimate government policy that has been set in place. There has been a deliberate attempt by the Liberal government to stagnate wages. And we're talking about things like getting rid of penalty rates, allowing companies to import entire workforces from Taiwan or China, and just put them in and then pay them Chinese rates while they're here. Like these are legal things that they have put in place. That's what I'm saying. It's just like, look, at the end of the day, you don't want to have a monopoly. You don't want an unaccountable institution controlling society. Mm-hmm. You at least want a government there that is saying, it is somewhat responsible to society, saying, no, you can't have that shit. You can't have that much power. Because that's essentially what happens, is that you have a government, it's just that government isn't accountable to you at all in any way, shape or form. Mm. That's what happens. Like media, telecommunications, all of these things. That's what's happening in Australia now. Like the whole thing with broadband, that was just because Murdoch and Telstra wanted to keep their ownership of broadband in this country, and that's why we have shitter broadband than Kenya, because it's better for their line. So at the end of the day, that monopoly is not delivering a better product for us, the Australian public. It's delivering us a product that is worse than Kenya's. That's how this shit works, man. Like, I don't know. Like, when I think about it too much, it bums me out. But I think that...
But I suppose it's just because you've said that Labor in the 80s actually introduced more competition and that was a good thing. But then monopolies are also definitely not advantageous for innovation. So...
You want competition.
So there needs to be enough regulation to break up a monopoly, or we need to open the market to overseas corporations and competition.
But there's a point, like when it comes to Google or something like that, where it's just global.
Yeah.
There's nothing to compete with Google. Like, we are at that stage now. Globalization has gotten to that stage. This is what Alex Jones is always banging on about, and people don't understand it because he's just railing for 3 hours a day, and he thinks he's covered these points because he's been talking about it for 20 years and his mind goes at 1,000,000 miles a minute. But he's basically saying that at this point there is just a global corporate government, and that's what he's talking about. These mega institutions that governments are too small to regulate this shit.
Yeah.
That's what you get into when you get to these entities. And the other thing is, again, another old institution that is terrified of Google and Facebook, Murdoch. All of these power brokers in the past, banks, the media, the people that own the media, even mining companies are scared of these things because they're getting so big that they can manipulate entire stock markets. It's like it's uncharted territory. When we're talking about monopolies, this is like really unprecedented stuff. So look, I really don't know what the answer is. The answer that they've come up with is actually kind of interesting, which is that what governments should do is band together and force populations to have shares in these massive companies like Facebook and Google, where there's just like a public vote that is set aside. So you're kind of just like forcing democracy into these companies. But I guess that's another discussion.
So there's some form of, could almost say it's a tax in that a certain amount of their shares have to be, well, first handed to the government and then publicly owned.
Yeah, and then so you just have another election. But
then it wouldn't. I mean, when you say that Google has this immense power, there are millions of shareholders that Google is made up of. I mean, obviously there are the people who are making the corporate decisions there as well. So
yeah, but
how much power did they individually or as a collective have?
Not much, especially because most of them are just going to be uninformed and just sitting there going like, yay, it went up a bit. There's really just a few majority shareholders, right? Those would be the ones that are making the decisions. And I don't know who those majority shareholders are when it comes to Google. And look, the CEO is obviously the one that's going to be calling the shots at the end of the day. And the thing is, the corporations, they kind of just, they start becoming their own monster. And they become too big for anyone to really do anything. This is the other thing, right? Like, people always say this, that the president of the United States, their portfolio is too big for that one person, that they, have to, be an expert in the military. They have to be an expert in farming. They have to, all this shit, right? It's the same thing when it comes to the CEO of Google. Like, it is a monster that is too big for a few people to control. So it kind of just gets a life of its own. Anyway, sorry.
That's fine.
It's a downer.
Yeah, no, we I'd keep going on that for a while, but
it's always a depressing thought.
All right. Well, yeah, I guess to conclude, I definitely have some reservations of giant corporations holding immense amounts of economic power, and that would then translate into government influence. Probably my cynicism isn't at your level though, but I haven't done the extensive research that you have either. So,
when it comes to
just monopolies and corporations having the power they do.
Yeah. Look, I understand where you're coming from, man. Like, it's it's too cynical to say, but this is the whole point, right? On an individual level, I don't think that the CEO of Google is a bad person. And I think that in his mind, he thinks he's doing God's work. But it's just this thing of, like, it's that point that what I'm saying is just, after a while, power, it's not the person that it's corrupting. It's the fact that this power just starts having like this, it becomes a machine. It's like what I'm always talking about with media bias. My whole show is about this, right? That it's just like the propaganda machine that was set up in the tens has had this life of its own now. It's not like if Murdoch wasn't there, it'd be someone else. Like everyone is just playing their little role. It's actually really, you know, maybe I should be looking at Shakespeare. I always shat on him, especially in high school. I still to this day, but that's basically because I'm like, man, what the fuck does thou mean? Like, I don't, like, you know, it's like, it's hard to say, but like, it is true that is why one of his most famous quotes is that of just like, all the world is a stage and all its participants, I can't remember the exact quote, but like, are merely actors.
Yeah.
He's
all
actually
the way,
really
all the
tapped
world
into
stage,
something.
all men and women merely players.
Players. It's a profound statement. Because, like, when you think about it with our context, right? If we weren't in our position, someone else would be. And they might not be doing it the same because of our personality traits and, like, the direction that we have. But at the end of the day, like, our jobs as comedians filled by someone else. Instantly. Like,
Sure,
if we didn't exist, done. It's the same thing when it comes to CEOs, the same thing when it comes to presidents. These things just keep going. It's like what I was learning when I was in Pakistan. I was talking to one of the chief bureaucrats and they were just saying that. It's just like, once something is set up, it just keeps moving that way.
Okay.
It's like, the other profound quote that I was saying, in our beginning lies our end. So the way that something is set up, it kind of just, like, habits start going into play, trajectories, all of these things. And, like, sometimes people can turn it around a bit and change it here and make it go down like that. But usually things kind of just go, like, in their natural conclusion.
Okay. All right, that's a good note to wrap up on.
Yeah, a conclusion.
I always forget. Got to spruik our Melbourne shows. I always forget. Anyway, come to our Melbourne shows.
Come to our Melbourne shows.
All right, thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Subscribe.
See ya.